Evening with a Legend is a series of presentations exclusive to legends of the famous 24 Hours of Le Mans, giving us an opportunity to bring a piece of Le Mans to you. By sharing stories and highlights of the big event, you get a chance to become part of the legend of Le Mans with guests from different eras of over 100 years of racing.
Tonight, we have an opportunity to bring a piece of Le Mans to you, sharing in the legend of Le Mans with guests from different eras of over 100 years of racing. And as your host, I'm delighted to introduce David Hobbs, who has enjoyed a long and diverse racing career with the 24 Hours of Le Mans serving as a cornerstone of his legacy in international motorsport. Competing in the iconic endurance race 20 times between 1962 and 1989, he drove a wide variety of machinery, including GTs, prototypes, and Group C cars for manufacturers such as Ford, Mirage, Porsche, BMW, and Jaguar. His adaptability and technical insight made him a valuable asset in multi-driver lineups, and he earned several strong finishes, including a class win in 1962, a third place overall in 1969 driving for John Wyer's Ford GT40 team, and then again in 1984 in a Porsche 956. David Hobbs' consistency, endurance, and charisma made him a fan favorite and a respected figure at Le Mans, where his career spans some of the most transformative decades in sports car racing history. And with that, I'm your host, Crew Chief Eric from the Motoring Podcast Network, welcoming everyone to this Evening with a Legend. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Eric. That's a very complimentary opening statement there by yourself. So thank you very much.
No worries. Let's begin at the beginning. What initially drew you to compete at Le Mans? How did that opportunity present itself? What do you remember about your very first Le Mans race in 1962? And how did that shape your approach to endurance racing later?
Well, actually, I hadn't done any open wheel racing. When I first went to Le Mans, I was fortunate enough to have a father who was extremely clever and had invented an automatic transmission that was way ahead of the field, in as much as it had 4 gears instead of 3, which most automatics had. And it did not have a fluid drive. It had a friction clutch, which was automatically operated. And it used very little power to run the gearbox. I had raced my mum's Morris Oxford, first of all, that in 1959. And in 1960, I raced Dad's XK140. And then his company got an injection of money from an American company who could see a lot of future in his gearbox. And it puts a lot of money into Dad's company. And they all thought, of course, I helped them think that it would be a good idea to advertise the gearbox with racing in a small car. So they bought a Lotus Elite for me. So in 1961, I raced the Lotus Elite, which was incredibly successful. I won 14 out of 18 starts with that car. We had some teething troubles to start with, and then we employed a guy who came up to volunteer his services, who had been an ex-Lotus employee. And he gave us a lot of tricks, how to lighten the car, how to strengthen it, especially where the axles are attached to the fiberglass shell. So I had a very successful year with that. In 1962, I got a call from Team Elite, which was run by Clive Hunter at the time. And he ran 2 or 3 Lotus Elites in Lotus colours. And of course, they had a stick shift. And they asked me to drive with them at Le Mans with Frank Gardner from Australia. So we duly assembled in a little village just south of Le Mans to do the 1962 24 hour. And that was my first run. Now, to say that I was very pleased would be an understatement, because when I'd started racing, not one of the reasons, a big reason that I wanted to go racing was I really wanted to win Le Mans. Le Mans to me seemed like a very, very groovy race. And I was slightly more interested in Le Mans than I was in Formula One, actually. So I was very pleased to be able to go to Le Mans. And the Team Elite people were very helpful. Ron Bennett was the mechanic on our car. And Ron Bennett just died a few months ago at the age of 94. And Ron went on to fame, I'm not sure about fortune, but he said he went on to fame as the chief mechanic when Denny Hulme drove for the Irish Donor, and they had an incredibly successful career in big sports car racing, the Brabham sports car, whatever it was, a BT21. Then he bought a Lola T70 and was all concrete in that. Ron Bennett was a terrific mechanic. Anyway, Frank and I, there was another car, John Wagstaff was driving in the other car. And anyway, we were fortunate enough to last the 24 hours, and it was incredibly hot. Very, very hot weekend. So we didn't have any rain, which of course was nice. And we won the class. Not only did we win the class, but we won the index of thermal efficiency as well. And we were 8th overall in the first British car home. All all in all, it was a pretty good weekend. So I thought, well, this is a bit of a doddle, this race. Should be able to win this one of these days.
So let's take 2 steps back so we can proceed through the rest of your Le Mans career. So with that early Lotus with the automatic transmission prototype that you were racing, most of that was done in the UK. Had you raced anywhere else in Europe before turning laps at Le Mans?
Funnily enough, in 61, we got an entry at the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers on the Nordschleife. And a friend of mine, Bill Pinkney, was racing a Lotus 11 and was very quick. So he and I went off to drive in the Nürburgring 1,000 Ks. Now, the gearbox caused a bit of a fracas because I had been told by a Lotus Elite owner the week before at Brands Hatch that why on earth would I race a car with an automatic transmission, because they were useless and they were absolute crap and just not worth, why was I doing it? And I said, well, it's the only reason I can race is because my dad's gearbox. Anyway, I beat him fairly soundly at Brands Hatch. And also a guy called Graham Warner, who was the sort of king of Lotus Elites, had a white and grey one. And I beat them both and won the race at Brands Hatch. And the following week, we the Nürburgring. We hadn't been there long, and I had a call came over the tannoy. Achtung Fahrlager, will Herr Hobbs come to the office? So I go to the office, and they say, your car is an automatic Getriebe. And I said, yes, it has. So, well, it's not homologated with an automatic. One of your competitors has protested. So they moved me up to 1200cc GT class to the 1600cc sports car class, which in the end, we won. Now, the Germans, being very Teutonic and very sort of precise, had a lot more money for sports cars than they did for GT cars, and of course a lot more money still for a bigger sports car. So I ended up with about 4 times the money that I would have done if I had won the GT class. Needless to say, I still beat the aforementioned competitor anyway. So I had actually done one race overseas, which was the Nürburgring 1,000 Ks in 1961. And in fact, I went again in 1962, and this time my co-driver was Richard Atwood. Of course, Richard Atwood and I were both apprentices at Jaguar at that time, or had been just right up to that time. And of course, Richard went on to become the first guy to win Le Mans for Porsche overall in 1970. So he and I drove at the Nürburgring as a quid pro quo. I drove his Formula Junior later that year at a place called Alton Park in England. And everybody thought I might come about 4th or 5th because there were very seasoned Formula Junior drivers in the race, a couple of whom were real Alton Park specialists. And I won that. So I won my very first single-seater race. And I won my very first international long-distance race, Nürburgring. And then later that year, 1962, Clive Hunt asked me to drive with him and Frank. And we won that too. It all seemed pretty easy, but it definitely got more difficult as time went on.
There's 20 attempts in your career at taking the crown at Le Mans. And jokingly, when Patrick Long was here, I said the only person that's got more attempts than Patrick is David Hobbs, because Patrick's got 16. And so how do we summarize 20 attempts? Do we kind of take it in blocks and say what happened between the milestones, 1962 and 1969? You were doing a lot of racing then, open wheel, Le Mans, sports cars, endurance. Do you want to talk about that period, or we want to just jump to the highlights?
Well, as you say, I was doing a lot. Well, in the 62, I drove the Formula Junior. Then in 1963, having won that race with Richard's car in 62, the Midland Racing Partnership were going to run the factory Lolas in 1963 in the Formula Junior Championship. They asked me to drive, which I did. So I became a Lola kind of works driver, even though it was a private team, but they were racing under the auspices of the factory team. That was the year that the Lola Mark 6 came out, which of course was the forerunner of the GT40. And so Richard and I drove that at Le Mans in 1963, which was an incredible hassle. It ran very late. We were down at the Bromley factory, which is where the Lola were in those days, little factory in Bromley, South London. We went down there, they were finishing the car and they were running way behind. And then on like Monday of race week, Eric said, well, you two had better go to Le Mans and sign on and get your medicals done and do all that stuff. And I'll drive the car down tomorrow, which of course we did. And he did, and he arrived. And we were late for scrutineering. And then, of course, the French officials, who weren't very official in those days, it was a bunch of old guys who just were friends of the track. I mean, they weren't real engineers, the technical team. They didn't like the sloping back window. They didn't like the mirror. They didn't like the trunk room for the box that's got to fit in the trunk. But we finally got practicing and started the race. It had the Colossi gearbox, which is a horrible box. And in the middle of the night, we had a problem. And of course, at Le Mans, you can't change or you couldn't then. Change components, you have to fix them. So we had the gearbox apart on the pit lane, which was separated from the track then by a white line. And this was actually the corner White House was still there. By the time you exited White House and got to the pits and the Dunlop curve, you were back up to top speed. So in those days, the Ferraris, I think, were doing probably 170 past the pits. And there's old Malcolm Malone lying on the floor, fiddling with his gearbox. Anyway, when they put it together, it only had 3. We had to leave one out. Going later on in the evening, well, about 5 o'clock in the morning, it was just starting to get light. I went down into White House, and it just sort of selected neutral. I couldn't get it into... So, you go whistling into White House about 150 miles an hour. Anyway, I crashed the car, and Eric was very disappointed in everything. Not as disappointed as I was, probably, but so that's what happened in 63, and that kind of relegated me on people's driver list. And in 64 and 5, I drove for Triumph in the Spitfire. I drove with the skid school specialist from Holland. In 64, we finished. I don't know how well we did in the class.
3rd in class.
Were we?
Yep.
Better than I thought.
4th the second time.
Well, the second time, because he crashed it at White House. We were 4th. There must have been only 4 cars in the class.
I've got the official records in front of me.
In 64, I drove for Team Lotus in there, Lotus Cortinas, over here in the States a couple of times at Marlborough and at Road America, fun enough. 65, I then started to repair my credentials a bit. Colonel Ronnie Hoare, who ran the Ferrari concessionaire in England and who ran some very successful race cars, asked me to drive one of his cars with a chap called Mike Salmon, who was also a very experienced driver. But we were only in a Dino, which, of course, as it's funny enough, I mean, it's the year which the Ford Ferrari is based around. We only lasted about an hour. Something broke. Can't remember what it was. And Richard Attwood was driving for him with David Piper in a P3, and that broke. Piers Courage and Roy Pike, an American driver, I think they won the GT class in the GTB or whatever it would have been in 1965. So there we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 races, and only one class win to talk about. In 66, I was racing a Lola T70. David Fletcher was the guy that ran it from an Esso station in Long Melford in Suffolk. That was a beautiful car. We won quite a few races in that. So John Surtees was running the Aston Martin Lola project, and he asked me to drive with him. But he and Aston Martin didn't get on well, and the engine was not very powerful, to be truthful. It was a big V8, and it was a bit heavy, and it wasn't as powerful as the Chev. The Aston Martin people kept saying it was the car, and Eric Broadley kept saying, well, it's not the car, it's the engine. So I did quite a bit of track testing with the engine, trying various things, and couldn't really get it to go very fast. Ironically, unbeknownst to them at the time, I was secretly testing the Jaguar XJ13 with the new Jaguar V12 engine, which was a twin overhead cam V12, which was extremely powerful, gave 570 horsepower, which back in 1965 was a hell of a lot of horsepower from a normally aspirated engine. So I could tell exactly which the problem was between the engine and the car. Anyway, we went to Le Mans, and while we're at Le Mans, John, who was not the easiest guy to get on with, had a big row with Aston because he wanted to change the sparking plug type from like Lucas to NGK or whatever it was, Champion spark plug to some other make. Anyway, the engine burned the piston in about 4 laps. So that was another one I didn't win. The other car went on for about an hour or two, and then it faded. John said it was Aston Martin's fault because they changed the head gasket without telling him. They said it was his fault because he changed the spark plug. So I don't know whoever's fault it was. So that was 1966. In 1967, I drove, what the hell did I drive in 1967?
67 was the Lola. 68, you switched to John Wire.
Oh, 67 was the Lola.
Yep.
What did I drive in 66 then?
66 was the Dino, and then 64 and 65 were the Triumph.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I haven't missed a car out.
Nope.
And then, of course, 68 and 69, I drove the golf cart, yeah.
So let's talk about 1969. That's your first overall podium, third
Right.
overall.
Yeah.
What was that like after so many attempts trying to get the overall win? Now you're up on the podium. What was that like for you?
Fantastic, of course. I mean, to be on that podium, which then was a shadow of what they've got now, but still in all, the crowds came out onto the track and the podium was above the grandstand, which, of course, was very different then to what it is now. The whole pit area changed drastically soon after that, when they rebuilt the pits, did the whole brand new pit area. But it was incredible. It was slightly tainted because It was the last year of Le Mans start, the old Le Mans start.
Right.
We qualified fairly well down the field, I don't know, 10th or 11th or something. Jackie Hicks was protesting the Le Mans start. So I ran across the road, jumped in, and then put the belt on going down the Mulsanne straight. Did all that fiddling around the belt, which is, of course, highly dangerous. But everybody else is doing that too. Jackie, of course, strolls across the track, more or less dead last away. Unfortunately for him, although it didn't last, poor old John Wolfe, who had decided to drive the 917, which he had bought from the factory, and he had a factory driver to help him. And of course, the factory kept saying, well, let Hugo start, and then you take over. But John said, no, it's my car, I want to start. And of course, he crashed at White House and was killed. Took out 2 or 3 other cars, including Chris Amon in the factory Ferrari. Now we're at the end of the second lap, we're a lap and a bit ahead of Jackie. And we stayed there for a long time until in the middle of the night, I had a brake failure going into the Mulsanne hairpin. So I go down the escape road, pumping the pedal, do a U-turn and go back to the pits. David York, the team manager, who was a huge Jackie Hicks fan, said it's pads. And I said, well, it's not pads. It's because it's also sub, Nope, it's pads. You do the driving, we'll do the engineering. Because in those days, pad change was very long, very complicated. Take the body off, take the wheels off. Then you have to open the calipers with those reverse type pliers. And everybody's wearing asbestos gloves. I said, well, I can tell you it's not just pads. Anyway, off I go. And of course, can't stop at the end of the pit lane. Nearly run the pit marshal over. Do another slow lap. They proceed to do the whole thing again. And of course, there's a little pipe across the top of the caliper, which had been clipped by a wheel weight, which had been put on the inside of the wheel, which as far as certain people have been told to absolutely do not put wheel weights on the inside of the rim because there's not enough clearance. Anyway, they chipped a hole in this pipe. So then they had to bleed the brakes. So now we're behind. And that's where because that was a fairly harrowing race all around, because after we got the brakes done, in my next stint, I'm going down the Mulsanne straight, and there's 2 908s in front of me who had passed me, and they were gradually pulling away. I mean, by a second or maybe a second and a half a lap, going through the kink. 4 tail lights go round the kink, and then there's this flash of brilliant white light, which is obviously headlight, and then a huge orange ball of flame erupts. So I'm braking and slowing down like mad and whistle around the kink with the brakes hard on, because can't see anything because it's all dust and smoke. I'm aware of this ball of fire that's ablaze stuck to the guardrail on the inside. And when I break free, there's the cab of the 908 bouncing down the road. So I'm looking where it's going to go to decide where to pass it. And then the driver falls out and he's bouncing down the road as well. So it was my in-lap. So I said to Mike, there's a dead driver down in the middle of the road. It's going to be an amazingly long caution flag while they clear everything up and blah, blah, blah. Well, the driver concerned was Udo Schutz. And Udo was a bit on the, let's say, porky side, a little bit overweight. Years later, at the Porsche Rennsport at Daytona, they said, how are you, my man? Very good to see you. And a big wave. This great big soul Udo Schutz. I said, Christ, last time I saw you were dead in the middle of the oh, no, I was not hurt at all. Everything was fine, And, of course, ultimately, the other car that he hadn't touched was Hans Hermann, who, of course, then went on right at the end of the race. They had that incredible dice with Jackie Hicks, which he won. But if things had just gone normally for us, we would have probably been quite a long way in front of them. That race would have been for second, instead of which we came third. But it was the podium, and it was a great feeling.
So that's 1969. And then you stay a household name at Le Mans for the next 3 years. So 10 years total, consecutive racing back to back at the 24 Hours of Le Mans through 1972. And from 69 with John Wyer in the GT40, you go to a 917K, then to Nart with the Ferrari 512M, and then in 1972 with a Matra. So that first decade of racing, how would you bundle it up?
Because in those days, Le Mans was completely different to what it is today. Say we qualified at 3 minutes, whatever we were doing, 3:56 or something in those days. David York, he'd say, well, for the first 6 hours, we're going to run at 4 minutes and 10 seconds. And then we'll reevaluate it as the race progresses. And of course, you had to be very careful of the brakes, because a brake pad change was a long-winded business. And of course, you couldn't use the engine too much for braking because you didn't want to blow the engine up. You had to be very careful with the brakes. You had to be very careful with the clutches. You had to be very careful with the engine, of course. Now, the flag goes at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and 3 or 4 drivers drive absolutely balls to the floor all the way through the 24 hours, absolutely flat out. And they hardly ever break. So cars breaking in those days was very common. And I was getting a bit fed up by then with driving inferior cars like the Spitfire. I mean, the Triumph people absolutely loved me. They thought I was a hero and that I should be driving much faster cars than theirs. And I had to agree with them. But, I got the opportunity to drive, so I did. And then, of course, the Aston Martin was incredibly disappointing, as was the Ferrari of Ronnie Hall. Could have been Ronnie Hall's car. Never break. He's always winning races. Yeah, I was a bit upset. In 1970, as you say, I drove the 970. That too was awfully disappointing because Mike and I were a very good pair, and we had the third car, which had a 4.7 litre engine, and the other two cars had the 5 litre, which was significantly more powerful. But in the end, they all dropped out, and Richard too had a 4.7. Me and Mike were miles ahead of Richard and Hans Herman, and Mike going past the pits, it started to rain. Or just before he got to the pit. Anyway, he thought, I'll just do one more lap. And, of course, gets to the Dunlop curve and runs into a car that's already crashed and parked there. So we were out. And if he hadn't done that, there's a very good chance we would have won the race. But, I mean, woulda, coulda, shoulda, doesn't count, unfortunately. The biggest disappointment was 71 in that Ferrari. Mark Donoghue and I were on the pole everywhere we went. Daytona, Sebring. He crashed at Daytona and at Sebring, which is very unlike Mark Donoghue. Never crashed. We put about 2,000 yards of tape on it at Daytona, and we finally ended up third at the 24 hour. At Sebring, he had a run-in with his absolute pet hate, Pedro Rodriguez, who he hated with a passion for some reason or other. He said that Pedro ran into him, not once, but twice. 3 times. He kept on banging into me. Well, Hal Crocker, the photographer, was down there and saw it all. And many years later, like in about 2018, he said, well, that's not exactly what I saw. It looked a lot more 50-50. It was definitely not old Pedro. And anyway, so Roger Penske, every time the engine came from Ferrari, it went straight to Al Bartz in California, who actually was a Chevrolet spec. But he would blueprint the engine, and they were absolutely bulletproof. They were incredible. And they gave more power than they did from the factory. Well, we're at Le Mans on bloody Friday. Old Roger comes waltzing into the garage, that Shell garage on the main road, just before he gets to the airport. He goes and says, hey, Ferrari are going to give us a brand new engine. Well, Don Cox, who was the chief engineer, Mark, of course, and Woody Woodard, who was the chief mechanic, they all said, no, what we've got, this engine's fine. It's running perfectly. There's nothing wrong with it. No, we've got to put the new engine in. He overruled everybody, and they put the new engine in. And at about 8 o'clock at night, we're already a lap ahead of Helmut Marko and Chris Van Lennep, who, of course, went on to win the thing. We're already a lap in front of them, and the bloody engine blows up. Luckily, not when I was driving. So every time the car broke, Mark was driving it. The accident at Daytona was not really his fault because Vic Elford had spun when he had a tyre go down at NASCAR 3. It caused a lot of dust and everybody slowed up. Some twerp in a 911 who we'd probably lapped about 40 times ran into Mark. That really wasn't his fault. Sebring, I'm not sure. Le Mans was definitely Roger's fault. We shouldn't have changed the engine. And then, of course, we go to the Watkins Glen for the 6 hour, and again, we're on the pole and leading, and the front hub broke. All incredibly unpenskiller. So that was very disappointing in 1971. Then in 1972, the Matra people asked me to drive the V12 with Jean-Pierre Jabouet. And we had the older car. Our car was a year old. Graham and Pescarolo's was a brand new one. Chris Amon was driving for them. I think I had 3 cars in the race. Anyway, Graham and Pescarolo were leading most of the race and, of course, won it. And me and old Jabouet were lying second for hours. And it rained in the morning. And Le Mans in the rain is not a pretty sight from the driver's point of view. I drove from 10 till 2. I did a 4-hour stint from 10 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. And I must have changed tyres about 3 times. I had the most god-awful tank slapper coming out of Arnage. By now we got the Porsche curves. But, in a car like that, between Arnage and the Porsche curve, when you arrive at the Porsche curves, you're up to about 190. Halfway there, the car just lifted off the road, and I'm twiddling the wheel, and suddenly the car, my heart went right up to my throat. That was one of the worst moments I had in the car. I just felt so completely helpless. Tyres weren't touching the road, they were floating along the top. But anyway, it hit a bit, and luckily the wheels were facing the right direction. And every time I came in, I said, why don't you let Jean-Pierre out? What about him? No, David, you were doing fantastic. Just fine. You keep going. You were doing wonderfully. You put another set of tyres on. Of course, it suddenly dawned on me that the reason they wanted me to go till 2 o'clock was so that Jean-Pierre could finish the Frenchman in the car when we came second. Well, me and my wife, Mags, with about half an hour to go, we set off for the club at the top of the Dunlop curve, which used to be where they had all the celebrations at the end of the race. So we're about halfway there, and I'm watching the cars go through the Dunlop curve. And I said to her, hold on a sec. I don't think our car went through, but I'll better just check. So we waited, and then we saw everybody go through, and I realised that our car wasn't there. So we went back to the pits. And he said, yeah, well, poor Jean-Pierre, the gearbox broke coming out of Mulsanne with about 20 minutes to go. There's another one we didn't win. And then by then I'd got very involved in Formula 5000 over here with Carl Hogan. So I missed quite a few years.
There's a 7-year gap where you start your next 10-year run at Le Mans. But 1979, your return to Le Mans after you took a break is really interesting because when I look at the records, not one, but 2 Fords in the same weekend. How did you pull that off? Driving with Derek Bell in one car and then with Vern Schuppen in the other. And 79, you also went to a 3-man team instead of a 2-man team.
I'm not quite sure how that happened, but that was that Mirage, which had been designed and built by John Horseman for, what's his name, out of Phoenix?
Harley Cluxton.
Harley Cluxton, exactly. How could I forget that name? I didn't like the car. I think I was a bit too tall for it. So my head got terribly buffeted around because it was an open car. And my head got really buffeted around badly by the air. I wasn't very happy in it. And I quite honestly, I wasn't very quick. And why they jumped me around, I'm not quite sure. The best part of that weekend was that it was my 40th birthday. And Ford France put on a hell of a party for us. At the Champagne, you remember Moet Chandon had that club. We had a big party in there for my 40th birthday. That was a lot of fun. It was the best part of the weekend, unfortunately. I'm not sure that I did drive 2 cars. If I did, it was because somebody wasn't feeling very well and they just shuffled the drivers around. It must have been something like that. Not quite sure what happened, quite honestly. But I wasn't very quick in either. I drove with Jasso for a bit. And of course, Jasso was the little guy. So he was well and truly out of the buffeting. And it blew me around a lot. I didn't like that. So that was that year. Then 1981, of course, I drove with Eddie Irvine in the M1, which was owned by the guy who was the manager of Pink Floyd.
Steve O'Rourke.
Steve O'Rourke, exactly. And Steve had asked me and Derek to drive for him at the beginning of the year. And we both drove at Silverstone, and we did quite well in the 1,000 Ks at Silverstone in May. And then Porsche asked Derek to drive for them in the new 936, whatever it was.
Yep.
Off he went, of course, and won the race with Hicks. And so I drove with Eddie. It wasn't terribly quick, that car. The worst thing about that was it broke when I was driving down at Terre Rouge. It was at about 1 o'clock lunchtime. So, you've done most of the race. My rule of thumb at Le Mans is if you're going to break before dinner on Saturday. Don't drag all through the bloody night and half the next day. The one with Matra, with 20 minutes to go. Oh, my God. Talk about the pits.
What's interesting about this late 70s, early 80s period is you have still some of the legends of legends. There's you, and there's Brian Redman, and there's Jackie Ickx, and I don't want to call you guys the old timers, but the veterans of Le Mans who had been around turning laps forever. And then you got the newcomers coming in. You've got the Hurley Haywoods, and you're starting to see Bobby Rahal show up from the US, and all these different names all mixing together at Le Mans. What was that like with the new class coming in, competing against people like Hurley Haywood as an example?
Well, of course, Hurley ultimately won it a lot of time. He was incredibly lucky. He got into a couple of winning cars when they were already winning, and he got popped in at the last minute. So he gets counted as a win, even though he didn't do much in the cars. Yeah, I mean, that didn't really worry me or concern me too much because Le Mans was still a much more technical race, not technical in this today, but you still had to drive carefully because the cars weren't as bulletproof. Although the new era of cars, like a 956 and then a 962, they were becoming much, much more bulletproof. Brake pads were still awkward to change. It wasn't until the Audi came along in the 2000s that we had all this quick change where they changed the whole bloody hub, the disc, the pads, the whole damn lot. It takes you like a few seconds, really. So I never really worried about the different drivers. By now, it's becoming irritating to do it so many times and not win it. And that was getting a bit of an ache. But that's racing. I mean, Tom Christensen, for instance, can you believe he's done it, 14 times? And he's only been off the podium once when it broke. And you've got to be lucky because I'll never forget. He won one year with the German driver who was a DTM driver whose name I can't remember. And the following year, they shuffled the teams around. And Tom Christensen goes and wins it again with Pirro or somebody. And the guy that he'd won with the year before ran the car out of gas. He was told to come in and kept going and ran the damn thing out of fuel. Why couldn't that happen while he drove with Tom Christensen? It certainly would have happened if he'd been driving with me. So you're going to be as lucky as well as good. Obviously, Tom Christensen was extremely lucky, but he was also very good. Yeah, and it was nice when I'd been driving a BMW. I didn't drive at Le Mans. I drove an M1, but it was not a BMW effort. I was driving a BMW over here in the States, in that little BMW 320i. And then we had the first March prototype, which was not very good. They sort of pulled out of racing for a bit. And I went to drive for John Fitzpatrick and then had another resurgence in the 80s.
And that begins your long stretch of Porsche from
Yeah.
then until the end.
Yeah. John and I were driving that Whaletail 935 from Kramer. And that car arrived at Le Mans from the factory like Tuesday. It had never turned a wheel. Put it together and finished it off and did race prep. And it ran faultlessly for the 24 hours. And it was a very quick car. It was a nice car to drive. Very good, very fast. And the factory were running the 3 956s, the Rothmans cars. And they were all brand new. And we just thought one of these cars is absolutely bound to drop out. At least we'll come third. But they'll finish 1, 2, 3. We finished fourth overall and won the GT class pretty comfortably, I believe. That was a good feeling too, to win the class with that car.
So right there, 935 into the 956s, big transition. 956 single turbo versus twin turbo, and then the 962 being the longer version of the 956 for safety reasons and whatnot. It brings us into the middle 80s. 1984, your next podium. It's been a lot of years since your last podium. What were you thinking taking home that third place in 84?
It was very good. So that sort of restarted kindled my interest in Le Mans again. It was a good result. We couldn't have done better, really. I mean, it was the best we could do with that car. Then the following year, he bought a 956, Skull Bandit colours. And I'm halfway between Mulsanne and Porsche curves, late evening, I think. And the engine just stopped. I did what all good drivers do. I got out and I took the back of the bloody body off somehow. I got the back off on my own, God knows how. And of course, I look in there, well, the fellow as good as me looking at the engine, and what am I going to do with it, What had happened was the fuel pump, it wasn't like I'd blown the thing up, the fuel pump drive had broken. Kellner from factory, he said to me, "Oh, David, that's the first time we have ever seen one break." I said, "Well, you've seen one break now, mate." It was very frustrating. I mean, such a funny thing to break, a bloody fuel pump drive. I mean, that sort of thing kind of runs for 100,000 miles. It's not under any strain at all. It's not like it may be a racing engine, but the fuel pump drive is not under any sort of strain at all. So that was damned irritating. Philippe was a bit of a whinger because he was a Formula One driver.
Well, so were you.
Yeah, but a real Formula One driver. Yeah, when I talk about luck, race morning is the warm-up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Changed the engine on Friday like everybody else did. We had very good engine men, terrific guys, all very good, very thorough. Fire the engine up Saturday morning. I drive out the pits on the warm-up lap, accelerate up the hills of the Donald curve, and the throttle sticks wide open. So I do a whole lap on the key, just slowing down, turn the engine off, put it on, turn it off, put it on, turn it off, put it on. They take the plenum chamber off, and there's a piece of rag down one of the inlets. They had left a paper towel in the plenum chamber. At about 6 o'clock in the morning, we'd been duking it out with Joest. So we finally took a fairly substantial lead. We thought, blimey, this could be it. No sooner are we in the lead than it goes on to 5 cylinders. So I come in, I don't understand it, everything working right here, go off again, come in again, have a look. They eventually took out the plug and disconnected the fuel. And we drove absolutely flat out from like 7 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon on 5 cylinders. So the thing was vibrating like hell. It's a miracle. And it all stayed together. And of course, we came third. Even with all that in and out stuff. It had burnt a valve, which of course I suppose had happened with the rag. Just didn't have enough fuel or whatever for that vital bloody warm-up lap. They'd obviously started to burn the valve, which then eventually gave up the ghost and burned.
What I love about your stories is that it overlaps with so many other legends that we've had on the show so far. And what's really fun about 1984, it was sort of a catastrophic year for everybody. Rick Knoop told a story about being in the Lola Mazda with Jim Busby, and they're having complications and issues with that car. You're having issues, but still managed a podium. And Margie Smith-Haas, who's in the audience with us, talked about the big wreck that happened in 84 that she witnessed while she was driving her Porsche. So So a lot of things happen in a single race, but all of you there at the same time. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I didn't know all this other mayhem was going on around me, and because I'm not interested in Rick Mazda misfiring or whatever. I mean, I couldn't believe it. John's cars were very well prepared, and I mean, starting throttle sticks open on the very opening lap. I mean, I just couldn't bloody believe it. It was just pathetic. And there we are. That was 84.
Yep.
80, what would I drive in 85?
85, you were still with Fitzpatrick in the 956 with Guy Edwards and Joe Gartner.
Okay, we came like fifth, right?
Fourth.
Yeah, just off the podium. Because the following year, poor old Joe was killed, wasn't he, on the Mulsanne Straight?
Then it seems like if you can't beat him, join him. So you went to Joest.
Yeah. Well, John by then had lost a lot of sponsorship because he lost to J. David when he went to jail for 20 years, his chief sponsor. So I drive for Ryan Yost, exactly. I mean, Ryan Yost has won more Le Mans than you can shake a stick at. So I drive with Sorrel Vondermerza. He was a bit bigger than me, actually. He's about 6'2" or 3". So we were pretty evenly matched on size. One of the troubles with driving with those little guys is you got to change the seat every time you have a pit stop. But I drove with Sorrel, and we were absolutely the favourites to win. Best driver team, best car, best team. Well, that was a year when they had dodgy fuel from the main supply. There's something got into the fuel or it wasn't up to scratch. And for some reason or other, Reinhold and his crew, who are absolutely bloody bulletproof, didn't adjust accordingly. So Sorrel starts the race, and in about 5 laps, he's in with a burnt piston. And the factory guys immediately came in, made adjustments to the fuel flow or changed the chip. Because by now, you've got the electronic. In the old days, it was change the jets or change the float shower, do this or do. Now it's you got to change the chip. And anyway, the bloody thing burnt out. I'm here, I'm riding old bloody Joest, and the engine breaks, and we're the first engine to break, not, oh Christ, I couldn't believe it. So that's what I mean about you got to be a bit lucky as well. Whichever way you look at it, it's not all my fault, and I didn't win. And then my last Le Mans,
1989, and a 962 GT1 with Damon Hill and Steven Ansgar.
Right, another cracking driver lineup. But Richard Lloyd had that designer who worked with him a lot, little guy, English guy, who had redesigned the 962, which he said had a lot more downforce and no more drag. Well, we were nearly 20 miles an hour slow on the straight, which at Le Mans, the kiss of death. If you're 3 miles an hour slow on the straight, it's bad. We all struggled on. Eventually, it broke. And of course, the awful thing was that the entry was Porsche Cars Great Britain. They had about 100 dealers there, all there in a great big camp and a big tent and a dining hall and Christ, that's what else. I mean, it was a very, very, very big deal. All these dealers, I mean, we did, and it broke. I mean, it finally gave up the ghost, which actually we didn't mind at all because we were floundering around. I mean, when I say 20 mile an hour, it might have been 15, but it was a massive amount slower down the straight. And yet, when you got to the Porsche curves, which was where I was going to be so fast at the Porsche curves, it wasn't any faster than anybody else either. So A, it didn't have any more downforce, and B, it obviously had a hell of a lot more drag.
When we look back over your 20 attempts at Le Mans, the good, the bad, and the unlucky, as it seems, what would you say was your favorite car out of all the cars you drove? I
drove so many cars over the years. Of course, the track by then completely different to what it was when I went there in 1962. Mulsanne was straight down to the hairpin, dead right-hander, with all that sand on the outside, catch the unwary in there. The GT40 of Wires were a beautiful long-distance car. They had a wonderful gearbox, that ZF as I call it, which had a beautiful shift. The only thing is you couldn't change the individual ratios, so if you're a bit short, you had to change the final ratio. Otherwise, that's the only thing you could change. You couldn't change the individual ratios, so you couldn't adjust the gearbox. But that was a great long-distance car because it had good visibility. It didn't get too hot. Great gearbox. Lots of room. And it had no vices. I mean, it didn't push or oversteer or do any nasty snap oversteer. I mean, it was a really easy car to drive, fast. You just had to be a bit careful with the brakes. But in those days, you had to be careful with everything. Then I guess the next best car I drove would be the 962 of Fitzpatrick's. That was a great long-distance car. John Bishop of IMSA didn't like them because they were so expensive. He wanted people to use domestic engines like the Chevs and the Fords and the Dodgers and put them in chassis like Lolas and March. They never ever got the job done because in those days, those American V8s were a bit prone to break. And the thing about the Porsche, it was absolutely bulletproof, you know. The only thing I didn't like about it was it had a synchromesh gearbox. And over the years, using the Hewland box, the LG and the Can-Am cars and the DG and the Formula car, you know, brakes were so good in those days. You could brake right into the apex and then put it in the gear you wanted to go out of the corner. I didn't do all that. You know, because I just thought that put more strain on the engine. It wasn't worth all that bloody bother changing gear about 1,000,000 times. You just brake like hell, put it in the gear you want, and then go. Well, obviously, with a synchromesh gearbox, you couldn't do that. You had to go down to the box. But other than that, I couldn't really fault. But, of course, the other big difference was that is I had been driving cars with wings for some time. You know, the first wing car I drove, we put a wing on a Lola Formula 5000. I mean, on the McLaren. But then suddenly, of course, the 962 had the tunnels. So it had a lot of ground effect. So it gripped. I mean, it stuck. And that took a bit of getting used to. I mean, not too much, but a bit. It was a great car. And, of course, it was so reliable. We didn't know it would cane it or anything like that. But, I mean, it was very good. And it didn't get too hot either. And it had enough room inside. So that was a good car, a nice car to drive.
So you mentioned when we started this journey that Le Mans came to you very early in your career. And as we know, first impressions are lasting impressions. But with your entire career, when you factor in Can-Am and Formula One and endurance racing and Le Mans and everything, did Le Mans keep itself at the top of the list for you? Has it always been at the pinnacle?
Yeah, I've always liked Le Mans. I then, of course, went on to do about another 10 from the TV booth with Sam Posey and Bob Varsha and a whole bunch of guys. Well, with ESPN first and then Speed Vision. I don't know, something about Le Mans. I went there for the 100th anniversary 2 years ago. I took my two grown grandsons. We went and stayed in a little hotel near, and we went to the Pilote Ancien Suite, which is in the old Goodyear grandstand, dead opposite the pit exit. So it's a good spot. But boy, oh boy, the walking, oh, Christ's sake. We're about a mile just walking. And at my age, I don't mind doing a bit of walking. I'm not sure I want to walk a mile each way. And then, of course, to get around the pits, don't forget it, because you've got to walk back to get under the tunnel. And if I go again, I want to be right inside, and I want to be able to take my car inside and do it properly. But Le Mans, to me, is a great track to drive on, too. Like the Daytona 24-hour. It's a bit of a Mickey Mouse track, whichever way you look at it. You're doing ridiculous speeds around that banking. Not quite so bad now they've got the chicane in, the bus stop. But I mean, when I went there with the Ferrari with Mark in 1971, and we were doing like 210 into the banking, And of course, you can't see diddly squat around the banking because once the car drops over, you can't see out the top of the windshield. If you put any sort of sign across the windshield, it says Sunoco, and it's a sun shield. I mean, you can't see anything. And you want to be able to see well around the banking. You don't want to see what's under your nose. Then, of course, the infield is also tight, except for the left sweeper in the middle. Now, of course, the bloody thing's flooded it all night, so no point, really. It sort of takes away from a proper 24-hour race, which includes darkness. But Le Mans got such great curves and beautiful long... Yeah, I mean, even with the chicane, I never drove it with the chicanes, because 89 was my last year, and of course, it wasn't until 90 that they put the chicanes. They're streets now. I mean, the Porsche curves are already there. Indianapolis has been moved back. A lot of stuff's been moved back, so it's a lot safer than it was in some ways, a lot safer. To me, Le Mans is just a terrific race because if you're going to be for 24 hours, you want to be on a long track like you're going somewhere.
I'm glad you brought it up before because I think a lot of people may or may not realize that you were commentating on motorsport events while you were still driving for quite a long time. And so to come back to Le Mans and be a commentator, what was that like? Did it give you a sense of maybe nostalgia? You wanted to be back on the track, or were you happy being in the booth?
Well, I don't know. I was happy to be in the booth, but it was good to be back. And of course, a lot of the people were still racing who were racing when I last did it. I can't remember what my first year in the booth was. It was probably about 1990. All the people I'd been racing with the year before were back in the race. From that point of view, I knew a lot of the contestants, and they knew me too. So they would talk to me, and I was with my son Guy, who was also helping in those days. And then we had Alain de Cadenet, who was obviously very well known at Le Mans with his efforts there. He was a great TV guy and a great storyteller. So I enjoyed those Le Mans with the TV. I did quite a few of them. As I say, certainly to start with, for the first few years, everybody knew exactly who I was. I mean, if I went to do it now, no one would have a clue who I was. But everybody's about 15. Well, they look it.
I know you talk about it in your book. How did you make the transition from pro driver to commentator?
I first started doing TV in 1976 because Ken Squire, who had interviewed me a few times, was the lead announcer for CBS Sports. And he said to me, I think it'd be good if you could come on board with me because Graham Hill was going to be his color commentator until he got killed in that plane crash. So they said, we need somebody. He said, I think you could do a good job. So I go for an interview at CBS, which is an absolute unmitigated disaster. I go all dolled up, got my blazer and tie and all that kit on. Because the guy I'm being interviewed by, whose name was Clarence Cross, was the vice president of sports, who knew absolutely nothing about racing. He said, well, of course, I won the Formula 5000 chap. What's Formula 5000? Well, it's like a Formula 1 car, but it's got a production engine in it. Oh, so it's not a Formula 1 then? No, it's Formula 4. Oh, okay, yeah. Anyway, I could tell I was on a losing wicket with this guy. Finally, I mean, the sweat's running down my back and, top lips all covered in sweat. It was a horrible, horrible interview. So when he shook me by the hand, I mean, if ever there was, don't call us, we'll call you, that was it. Well, as luck would have it, I was a bit lucky. Oh, now here I was very lucky. That was 1975 in October. And I got a drive for BMW in the 3CSL in the 24 hour in 1976. And I got a friend of mine who got me a deal with Coca-Cola. We also did a deal with Benny Parsons. So he was going to drive with me in the CSL in the 24 hour. And I would drive his backup car in the 500, both of which would have Coca-Cola sponsorship. So I stay over between the 24 hour and the 500. Now, Ken Squire has been working on CBS forever, saying, you don't want to bother all that indie stuff in Formula 1. NASCAR's where it's at. NASCAR's where it's at. NASCAR's where it's at. So finally, I guess to get him off their back, they send Clarence Cross down to watch the Daytona 500 in 1976. Being late January, early February in the winter, he lives in New York. So he and his wife came down and have a few days R&R before the race. And Ken Squire had a radio show from the Hawaiian Inn. One night he says to me, do you want to be on the show? Yep, sure. So I walked down there from the Hilton. And there is Clarence Cross with his wife. And I'm sitting at their table. Then Ken asked me up. He does people like Cale Yarborough and, Richard Petty's there. They're all there, all the drivers are there. So I go up and I had about 3 or 4 gin and tonics. So I'm right on top of the cam. I haven't actually slid down the back yet. So he and I had a hysterically funny 5 or 10 minutes. And all these NASCAR drivers were all rolling around and laughing like hell. So when I go back to sit down, Mrs. Cross says to me, you shouldn't be driving race cars. You should be on the stage. So I said, well, don't tell me, tell him, He said, well, I see a different side of you now to what I saw in the interview and then blah, blah. So, yeah, we'll try and find something for you. Very much later on in the year, the Pocono 500, it was a champ car race and a kart car. They wanted a driver who instead said he wanted to drive in the race. So I already pushed it, and they put me on the 500 with Ken for Pocono. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I never missed a motor race with CBS from then until 1996 when I left to join Speedbridge. And, of course, was part of the team that did the 1979 Daytona 500, which, of course, was just beyond all expectation because it snowed up north. Half the football games were cancelled. And they had an audience of about 6 or 7 million. They thought they were going to get about 300,000. And, of course, Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison are duking it out for the lead. And on the last lap, they crash at turn 3 and they hide at the wall. And then they both get out and start fighting. And we're both going crazy in the booth. Richard Petty goes on from a distant third to win his 900th Daytona 500. And Bobby Allison, who was second, goes around and he gets to the fight. So he stops and gets out of his car to help his brother. You just couldn't have written a better script. And anyway,
So speaking of scripts, and this is a question I plan to ask Bob Varsha as well when he comes on, because I've been thinking about this. You watch Formula One and David Coulthard is up there and he's talking about this is what Piastri is thinking right now. And it makes me wonder as a commentator, how much of the stuff that you guys say when you're on air is, okay, I get what they're doing or I empathize with the driver, or do you just flat out make it up?
Oh, no. I mean, I'm the color guy, so I don't have to do anything. It's up to the Bob Varshas and the Lee Differs to do all the difficult stuff. Remember whose birthday it is and how many races they've done and what they, My job to say what's going on the track. Sometimes I exaggerate a little bit, but generally speaking, I call a spade a spade. I mean, I don't sort of pussyfoot around because you have to be very careful with people like Bernie Eccleston. You have to be very careful, otherwise the next thing you'd have you off the air. It was the same with NASCAR. The France family rule, it's their domain. And that reminds me, at 19, be about 83 or 4, driving Fitzpatrick at Le Mans. Because, I mean, I put my uniform on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. I didn't take it off until these days. They all have showers and air-conditioned, silent rooms, and they've got clean overalls, and people washing their overalls and their underwear, and they have new gloves every stint and new helmets and all that stuff. We just had the old same stuff. So in the 500 that year, they had the yellow flag rule, which in those days, you could race to the flag, even though there was a yellow flag out. You might actually race past where the yellow flag was. So I said, I just think this is a crazy rule. You know, someone's going to get killed one of these days. It's just absolute madness to race to the flag when you got a yellow caution flag. I go to Le Mans in June. The race is like 1st of February. I get out of the car between stints and I'm sweating like hell, soaking wet. I'm walking back to what was our motorhome, which was a little tiny 2-wheel caravan, you know. And Bill France is there coming to the race with Alan Berteau. This limousine is pulling through the paddock area. And Bill France gets out of the car. Near my what? And not so much as a, hey, Dave, how you doing? How's the race going? Blah, blah. He gets this, says, there's the boy that don't like our rules. I mean, I thought, good God, talk about a memory like a bloody elephant for the wrong thing. Not so much as if I'd been thinking, I would have said, yeah, and good evening to you too, Bill. But yeah, he got out and said, there's the boy that don't like our rules. I thought, well, that's the best you could do. So, yeah, that was funny.
Well, David, before we switch to our very final set of questions, I got 2 from the crowd. People are dying to know the answer, so I'm going to do them in reverse order. Paul Robinson writes, please ask David how the Group 7 Can-Am compared to the cars at Le Mans. I lived near Mid-Ohio and watched David and Denny Hume, Peter Revson, Mark Donohue, all the races. Paul is a huge Can-Am fan. So talk a little bit about the Can-Am days.
Well, I mean, the Can-Am was a part of racing history in the United States that people absolutely love. And like a lot of nostalgia things, everybody thinks it was absolutely amazing. And it was. The cars were great. When Schumacher was winning Formula One races one after the other, and then when Vettel was winning race, it was all show that Formula One. It's the same guy who wins the race. Well, for God's sake, Can-Am, 1967 to 1971, Denny and Bruce, or then Bruce and Peter Revson, came first and second in practically every race. Jackie Stewart won a couple. Peter Revson might have won one. I mean, it was incredibly one-sided, but those were exciting cars. The Le Mans cars, obviously, when I first did Le Mans, obviously the Can-Am cars were much bigger and faster. But towards the end, when those turbocharged engines, although they were smaller displacement, they had the same sort of horsepower, even more torque than those big V8s. But one of the nicest cars I ever drove was for Roy Woods in 1973. He bought Peter Revson's the M20, which was the last McLaren, and we raced it in Carling Black Label colours. And one of the best races I ever had was I came second to Mark Donohue at Watkins Glen in 1973. He was in the 9:17:30, which was absolutely just ridiculously fast. I beat all the other 9:17:10, which had won the championship the year before. But because that McLaren, I could see why Bruce and then Denny had won so many races, because the car was just so incredibly good to drive. Obviously, huge sorts of horsepower. Unfortunately, Roy and his engine guy kept trying to get more and more horsepower out of it by making the engine bigger and bigger. You know, we're up to 800 cubic inches, but the trouble is, of course, it became totally unreliable. And we had quite a few engine failures. But that was one of my best ever races. And that was a beautiful car to drive. It was very sensitive. Change the roll bar a bit, or change the spring, change the ride height, eighth of an inch or quarter of an inch. And you could really feel the difference. So it was a great car. So I like those Can-Am cars. But of course, in the end, the rules were you can run what you brung. And of course, Porsche brung the 917, and of course he complains, oh, well, Porsche have ruined the sport. Well, Porsche have done exactly what the rules said all along. So, I mean, tough shit. I mean, that's the way things go. They came with a better machine.
All right. Take us back again to 1964, because Scott writes, can you please share the story about your commute to the 1,000 kilometers of the Nürburgring with Sterling Moss?
God. Sterling had that terrible crash in 1962. And then I think prematurely retired. He went to drive and he just didn't think he was up to scratch. But then many years later, he said, I should have just stuck it out. He said, because I think I could have still done very well. And I think he would have done. And so Sterling has me drive, I think it's a 914. Scott just tells me it was a 904 I was driving, not a 914. So he's probably right. Well, I'm sure he's right. But I'm driving a guy called Lucky Kasner. who won it the year before in a birdcage Maserati overall. He won it with, I think, driving with Dan Gurney. So we were driving 914. I can't remember where we were staying, but we were staying sort of about 20 miles from the track. Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers in those days attracted about 120, 130,000 people, because obviously 14-mile track, there's plenty of room for them. But the roads weren't really up. So I'm with Sterling in whatever he was in. Sterling and Susan were in the front. I'm sitting in the back, and Sterling's driving. We come to the back of this tail of traffic that's about 10 miles long. Oh, Sterling just proceeds to overtake everybody, going down the outside. Then they'd move over, and somebody'd see him coming in the mirror, and they'd move out. So he'd just chop and change, go down the grass verge, and then go past. And it just scared the shit out of me. I mean, we just... How we weren't killed on that drive in, I have no idea. I mean, it was the most hair-raising part of the whole bloody weekend. I mean, it made the race look like very tame. It was hair-raising. We were running late because we had to get there. So, yeah, that was a very exciting drive. It was the most dangerous part of the whole weekend.
You mentioned to me the last time we spoke that Le Mans is one of your favorites, but also one of your biggest regrets. So when you look back over all your attempts at Le Mans, put it in perspective for everybody as a pro driver who always wanted to win the crown but never got it.
Well, as you get older, all this stuff sort of fades, and it's no good holding a grudge forever, because I just didn't like Jackie Ickx because David York was infatuated with Jackie Ickx. I'm sure that he saw a great opportunity at Le Mans to slow me down by doing that bloody brake pad change when it didn't need it. That's one thing. And we were leading at Watkins Glen. Me and Paul Hawkins had a lap lead over Jackie Ickx. And David York, when I came into the pitch, he said, I want you to slow down because I want Jackie Ickx to win the race, which of course I did. But I mean, now, Jackie and I are like a couple of old brothers, hey, David, how you doing, David? It's lovely to see you. And I said, hey, Jackie. And he said, you didn't like me, did you? I said, no, I didn't like you at all. That's racing. You got to take the rough with the smooth. I didn't win it. And of course, Brian Redman's big regret, he never won Le Mans. Bob Wallach never won it, and he won everything else. Him and Redman won everything, but they didn't win Le Mans. And it's like so many IndyCar drivers, if they don't win the Indy 500, they don't think they've had a career. The fact that I didn't win it is regretful, but it was all 40 years ago. So, c'est la vie, as the French would say.
Well, you're still very active in the motorsports community as a whole. What's next for you, David? Anything?
Nothing this year. I went to a concourse in Lakeland last week. Lovely affair. Big crowd, a lot of cars. I think my next motor racing thing is going to be probably the Daytona 24 hours. Probably go there. So not much.
On that, before we wrap out, I want to pass the torch to our ACO representative, David Lowe, for some final thoughts.
David, on behalf of the ACO and endurance racing fans around the world, I just want to thank you for an incredible evening. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate it. I enjoyed being asked to be on it. And yeah, a lot of good fun, a lot of good questions.
I look forward to catching up with you in the near future. Thank you again so much.
All right. Thank you, David.
And that concludes this Evening with a Legend, where we had the pleasure of diving into the remarkable Le Mans journey of David Hobbs, a man whose racing career spans over 2 transformative decades at the Circuit de la Sarthe. From his class win in the early 1960s to driving some of the most iconic endurance machines for legendary teams, David brought a rare combination of skill, consistency, and wit to the world's most grueling endurance race. His stories remind us why Le Mans isn't just a race, it's a test of time, talent, and tenacity. If you want to hear more from David Hobbs, be sure to check out his book, Habbo, Motor Racer, Motor Mouth, and follow him on social media at mrdavid.hobbs on Facebook and Mr. David Hobbs on Twitter. We hope you enjoyed this presentation and look forward to more Evening with a Legend throughout the season. And on behalf of everyone here and those listening at home, thank you, David, for sharing your stories with us.
Thank you very much, Jack. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and hearing your stories, so thank you again.
Thank you very much.
This episode has been brought to you by the Automobile Club of the West and the ACO USA. From the awe-inspiring speed demons that have graced the track to the courageous drivers who have pushed the limits of endurance, the 24 Hours of Le Mans is an automotive spectacle like no other. For over a century, the 24 Hours Le Mans has urged manufacturers to innovate for the benefit of future motorists, and it's a celebration of the relentless pursuit of speed and excellence in the world of motorsports. To learn more about or to become a member of the ACO USA, look no further than www.lemans.org. Click on English in the upper right corner, and then click on the ACO Members tab for club offers. Once you've become a member, you can follow all the action on the Facebook group ACO USA Members Club and become part of the legend with future Evening with the Legend meetups. This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.